what is government? I mean, really, what is it? It's a word we hear constantly, right? It's something we deal with every single day, maybe without even thinking about it. But have you ever just stopped and thought, what does that word, that concept actually mean? Is it just, a big building somewhere?
Mm.
Or the people making decisions? Or is it something more? Today, we're doing a real deep dive into exactly the nature and the functions of government. Our mission, really, is to give you a kind of shortcut.
Yeah.
We want to unpack the different ways people talk about government, look at its defining features, understand what it actually does for us, and, even touch on why studying it matters, and, frankly, why it can be pretty challenging. We've looked at some really interesting source material to help us make sense of it all.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Government seems like such a straightforward term on the surface.
Right.
But when you start digging, you find it's incredibly layered, really broad and deep. And understanding those different layers, those distinctions, well, it genuinely helps you make better sense of the world around you, from local stuff right up to global events.
Okay, so let's dive right in then. Let's unpack this term. Our sources point to basically three distinct ways to understand government. I actually found this framework quite helpful. First up, there's government as an institution of the state. This is probably what most people picture first, right?
Right.
The formal setup, the legal machinery designed to run things. It's the canon, the tangible parts. The executive branch, the legislature, the judiciary. We know these names, but our sources emphasize they're not just separate boxes. They're like the arms of government, constantly working together well, supposed to be creating, enforcing, and interpreting the laws. And it's not just the top level either. It goes right down to all those administrative agencies, the bureaucracies, the people doing the day-to-day stuff, delivering services, making policies happen on the ground. It's the official apparatus, you could say.
Exactly. And building right on that idea of the structures, the sources then talk about how government works as a process. That's the second meaning. Government as an art or process of governing. And this, for me, is where it gets really fascinating. It moves beyond just the buildings and roles to the actual doing. It's about the activities, the strategies, the principles they use to manage a state. Think of it less like a static organization chart and more like navigating a constantly changing landscape. It's not just that there are institutions, but how decisions get made within them, how laws are actually enforced, how money and resources are managed day to day. Think about how a government responds to a crisis, maybe like a natural disaster, or how it develops new policies or tries to engage with citizens. This view really highlights the active, almost improvisational nature of governing sometimes, rather than just the fixed structures on paper.
That's such a crucial distinction, isn't it? The structure versus the action. Okay, and then finally, our sources talk about government as an academic field of study. This is literally, the subject you might study at university. It focuses on political systems, institutions, policies, globalization, all those governance processes we were just talking about. It's where you really dig into understanding not just what the institutions are, but maybe why politicians behave certain ways or what the real impact of a specific policy is, and that whole complex relationship between the state and the people. So what this means for you, listening, is that when you hear that word government, you now have a richer toolkit, right? You can think, are they talking about the buildings and people, the actions being taken, or the academic study of it all? It just adds layers.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Look.
Layers of understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that foundation, let's maybe shift gears a bit and look at some fundamental characteristics. The things that really define what a government is, according to our sources, these are sort of the essential ingredients.
And the first one that jumped out at me was non-permanency, which sounds a bit obvious maybe, but it's profound. Government positions, administrations, they're temporary. No single government, no leader, no party stays in power forever. Now, this change can happen through elections, like we see in democracies, but it also happens other ways, right? Revolutions, resignations, coups, reforms, sometimes pressure from outside, even in systems that aren't democratic. And why does this matter? Well, this non-permanency is actually vital. It means power can shift. It can be renewed. It ideally reflects what people need or want over time. It's a check against power becoming too entrenched.
Absolutely. And linked very closely to that is the supremacy of government laws. This is a really core principle. Basically, laws that are legitimately made by the government trump any other rules or laws within that territory. Everyone has to follow them. Citizens, companies, even local or regional governments, they all fall under these higher laws. And the point isn't just control. It's about creating a predictable, ordered society. It ensures consistency, fairness, and it protects people's rights by setting out the rules of the game for everyone.
Right, so the laws are supreme. But how does the government make sure people actually follow them? That leads to the next feature. It's monopoly over the use of force. This sounds a bit stark, but it means the government is the only entity that has the legal right to use or authorize physical force, coercion, violence within its borders. We see this with the police, the military, security agencies. They're the ones empowered to use force when necessary. And think about why that's needed. Without it, well, it could be chaos, right? Everyone for the sword. This monopoly is meant to maintain law and order, protect people, enforce the laws we just talked about, and defend the country. It stops private groups or individuals from lawfully using force themselves.
hmm And that power, that monopoly, leads directly to the idea of legitimacy. This is absolutely crucial. Legitimacy is about whether people, the citizens in other countries, generally accept and recognize the government's authority to rule. Now, a government can gain legitimacy in different ways. Democratic elections are a big one, but it could also be through historical tradition, or maybe just being seen as effective and competent. But here's the thing. When a government is seen as legitimate, people are much more likely to accept its decisions, to cooperate. That leads to stability. Which raises a really interesting question for any society, doesn't it? How does a government actually earn that legitimacy? And
Yeah.
maybe even harder, how does it keep it over time?
That's a fantastic question. Because it's clearly not automatic, is it? It feels like something that needs constant work.
Okay, and related to legitimacy is sovereignty. This is about the government's supreme power to control its own affairs without outsiders interfering. Think of it like being the boss in your own house, but for a country. Within its borders, a sovereign government has the ultimate authority, making laws, setting policies, running things without another country telling it what to do. It's fundamental to being an independent nation.
Definitely. And the last defining feature our sources highlight is the universality of government's reach. This basically means the government's authority extends to everyone within its borders. The laws apply to all people. Doesn't matter what your background is, your social status, how wealthy you are. Theoretically, the law applies equally. It reinforces that idea that nobody is above the law and the government's influence touches all parts of society. Now, we could probably have a whole discussion about how well this works in practice versus the ideal.
Sure, the reality can be complex. Right. The principle itself that universality is a defining feature of what government is, or at least aims to be. And when you put all these features together, non-permanency, supreme laws, monopoly on a force, legitimacy, sovereignty, universal reach, you get a pretty clear picture of what makes government unique.
That's a really helpful way to synthesize it. Okay, so we've looked at what government is, its different meanings, its defining features. Let's pivot now to what it actually does. Because our sources list a whole range of functions that honestly touch your life every single day, whether you realize it or not. Let's just hit a few key ones first. Obvious one, making and changing laws. That's the legislature, right? Constantly creating, tweaking, getting rid of laws to manage society, solve problems, keep things fair. Then there's maintaining law and order. Police, courts, keeping the peace, investigating crime, ensuring justice is served, protecting communities, and maybe the most visible one, providing public services. Think about your day. Education for kids, healthcare access, roads you drive on, police and fire services, clean water, electricity. These are fundamental things government provides.
Absolutely fundamental. And building on those, governments are also neck deep in managing the economy, setting economic policies, regulating businesses, collecting taxes, trying to spur development, create jobs, promote growth, maybe reduce inequality. It's a huge task. Then, of course, national defense and security, protecting the country from outside threats. Military, border security, intelligence. That's a core function. And in our world today, international relations and diplomacy is huge, representing the country abroad, building relationships, negotiating treaties, working with international bodies like the UN, and they're constantly building public infrastructure. Not just roads, but communication networks, energy grids, schools, hospitals, the physical backbone of a modern society. And increasingly important, protecting the environment, making rules about pollution, pushing sustainability, tackling climate change, managing natural resources for the future. And there's also preserving social and cultural values. This can be complex, but it includes things like protecting heritage, safeguarding minority rights, trying to foster social cohesion, tackling discrimination. And kind of overarching all of this is the need for just effective governance, good administration, solid leadership, using public money transparently and efficiently. It's just the sheer scope is amazing when you lay it all out, isn't it? From global politics, right down to your local park maintenance, it's all aimed ultimately at the well-being of society. These aren't abstract ideas. They're the engine running things for your safety, your prosperity, your quality of life.
It really does drive home how pervasive government's role is. Wow. Okay, so we touched earlier on government as an academic field of study. Let's spend a moment on that. Why would someone actually choose to study this stuff? I mean, given how complex it clearly is. Well, the sources give some really good reasons. First, it's great for just expanding political knowledge. You deepen your understanding of ideas, theories, debates. It broadens your horizons, helps you think critically about issues local, national, global. It also really helps you in understanding public policies. You learn about the rules that shape everything: healthcare, education, the environment. That knowledge lets you make more informed choices and engage more effectively. And that leads to the next point. Studying government actively encourages political participation. You'll learn about your rights, your responsibilities, how the system works, how you can actually have an impact, whether it's voting or getting involved in your community. It can also play a part in fostering nationalism and patriotism, developing pride in your country by understanding its system, its values, its history. And of course, it's a fantastic way of learning about the world, gain insights into international relations, how other countries work, global challenges like climate change or pandemics. And practically speaking, it definitely opens career opportunities. Lots of paths open up working in government itself: public administration, policy analysis, law, journalism, teaching. So when you think about just growing intellectually or maybe figuring out a career, there are some pretty compelling reasons there, right?
Well, absolutely. Very compelling. But, like any serious field of study, there's a flip side. Our sources are pretty honest about the challenges, the demerits, if you like, of studying government. One big one is just the sheer complexity and depth. Let's face it, grasping all the intricate concepts, the theories, how it all really works in practice, it can be tough, really demanding. Then you've got the numerous systems and ideologies, just trying to get your head around all the different ways countries organize themselves politically, all the different isms. It can feel overwhelming. Another real challenge is its evolving and dynamic nature. Politics never stands still, does it? Things change constantly. Keeping up with current events, policy shifts, new political trends, it's like trying to hit a moving target, which can be frustrating if you like neat answers. It also really requires a need for broad knowledge. You can't just study government in a vacuum. You need to pull in history, economics, sociology, psychology sometimes to really understand the context. And, well, there's often a lot of uncertainty. Political events are hard to predict. Outcomes aren't guaranteed. That can be unsatisfying if you're looking for clear, definitive solutions. Plus, you inevitably run into ethical dilemmas. You're often looking at difficult moral choices, right? Examining controversial policies or leaders' decisions. Think about balancing economic needs versus environmental protection, or the decision to use military force. These aren't easy questions. And finally, you always have to be aware of bias and interpretation variations. Different people see the same events differently, so you constantly need to be critical of your sources, consider multiple viewpoints, and try to form your own balanced understanding. But look, if we connect this back, while these challenges make studying government demanding, maybe even frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it could be.
Right, but they also highlight why it's so important. They underscore the need for critical thinking, for nuanced understanding, for being able to navigate complexity, which are pretty vital skills for anyone living in the world today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Wow, we've really covered some ground today, haven't we? We've taken this deep dive, looked at the different meanings of government, its core features, that huge range of functions it performs in our lives, and even the pros and cons of studying it.
Yeah, our goal really was to give you that shortcut, like you said at the start, to maybe provide some of those aha moments that help clarify a topic that's so central to everything but often feels, well, a bit murky.
Great. We really hope this whole exploration has given you a fresh perspective, maybe a richer way to think about this thing called government that shakes so much of our world.
And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with, something to chew on. We talked about the non-permanency of government and its evolving dynamic nature. So given that things are always changing, how does your understanding, your engagement with government's functions and features actually contribute to shaping its direction, both right where you live, in your community, and maybe even beyond?